what a pleasure it is to be at the CoAct conference. And wow, I'm thinking the combination of wizard and matchmaker, goodness knows what's going to happen at the dinner tonight. But so good morning. The organisers told me there was lots more people here. Let's try that again. Good morning. There we go. Now, we've just seen my one behavioural fault. Well, the one that I'm prepared to admit to. Now that Tim Ferguson's finished his introduction, he probably would have told you a few more, but he was very generous to me this morning. But that is that if you nod or put your hand up to respond to my questions, I'll completely ignore you. So when I ask you questions, and I promise you there will be more questions, you have to use your voices to answer them. Throw out all those school rules. So I want to start with a story this morning. Picture the scene. Our hero is at a British railway station waiting for a train. The waiting area is fairly full, so he smiles at a businessman sitting on his own at a table for four. He receives a nod in response and at the empty chair across the table, so he sits down. He places his coffee and biscuits on the table and spreads out his newspaper. Takes a sip from the coffee and starts to read. A few newspaper articles later, he notices his table companion, with whom he's not exchanged a word, reach out, tear open a packet of biscuits and take one. Now, he's somewhat shocked, but this is a British railway station, so he wonders whether he should comment and what he should say. And in the end, he just reaches out and takes a biscuit himself. Soon afterwards, the businessman reaches out and takes a second biscuit. So our hero matches his action, and still nothing is said. And this goes on until the 8 biscuits in the packet are gone. The businessman then gets up, nods and smiles at our hero, and walks off, presumably, to catch his train. Our hero further ponders the businessman's conduct while he waits for his train. He finds it difficult to concentrate on his newspaper, so shocked is he by the conduct. And as the time for his train approaches, he stands up to go to the platform. He picks up his empty coffee cup, folds his newspaper, and discovers his own packet of biscuits underneath it. Now, this is a Douglas Adams story, right? Comically highlighting how we make assumptions and how our brain and our actions can cause us to just reinforce those assumptions rather than questioning and testing them. This story is funny, but the assumptions which are made about people who are disadvantaged in the Australian community are not. The assumptions made, for instance, about people with disabilities are often negative and usually wrong, and they're made about us every day of our lives. We are limited by the soft bigotry of low expectations. I want in this presentation to challenge those assumptions, because for people with disabilities or people who are disadvantaged, and I realise that CoAct serves a range of groups of people who are disadvantaged, but I'll mainly talk about people with disabilities because that's my area of expertise. For people who are disadvantaged, to fully participate in Australian society, we need to turn those assumptions on their heads. And we'll do that in a very practical way towards the end of my presentation. Now, I'm an unusual conference presenter because I actually value social networking continuing while I'm talking. So I won't be urging you to turn your phones onto silent or to turn them off. Keep tweeting. Enjoy a good Tuesday morning of electronic graffiti. And I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter as Graeme Innes, GraemeInnes. So if you like the presentation, tweet about it. If you don't like the presentation, I'm Tim Ferguson, okay? I probably won't tweet while I'm talking today, but it has been known to occur in the past. Anyway, you want to get as many posts in as possible on Facebook or Twitter or whatever before the attorney turns on monitoring your metadata. So How many of you are tweeting? Oh, that's good. Come on. I think you should, many more of you should be able to tweet than that. I mean, with all these heroes of social change here, you're just a selfie stick away from a photo opportunity. But while you tweet, let me ask you another question. Do you know what the walk of shame is? Oh, good. Most of you have done it at one time or another. You know, when you sleep where you shouldn't, usually in the company of someone to whom you are attracted, and it doesn't just involve sleeping, right? It's that walk when you leave the next morning. Now look, I've done it. We've all done it. I mean, I did it more than 26 years ago, I keep assuring my wife, but who else has done it? Come on, yes, yeah, okay. Well, apparently, according to our federal government, Gillian Triggs and I and the other commissioners at the Australian Human Rights Commission should be doing that walk again because of the recent report on children in detention. You know, that report on a topic about which the Commission has been criticising governments of both persuasions for more than a decade. I did 3 about the Rudd government and the Gillard government when I was Human Rights Commissioner, all recommending that kids should be released from immigration detention. Well, you know what? I'm not ashamed of those reports. I'm proud of them. And I'm proud of the role that the Commission plays in our democratic process. I'm proud of what we've achieved for Aboriginal people, for women, for same-sex couples, and for people with disabilities, just to name a few of the areas that the Commission has advocated on behalf of. And I think it's the members of the government who should be ashamed for shooting the messenger rather than addressing the real problem, that is kids in detention. So I'll keep talking about my walk of shame until kids are no longer in detention. Because you know what? Because you know what, Team Australia? We're better than that. And the performance of members of Parliament from both sides on this issue, to quote Dalek Supreme, a very important authority, make your incompetence sound like an achievement. Now, why, you might ask, do I raise this issue in a presentation on social change? Well, I do so to give my remarks context. We're living in an environment where shooting the messenger has become, to paraphrase Missy Higgins, a danger governments are addicted to. In the last 2 years, $1 billion of Commonwealth funding has been taken away from the community or third sector. $1 billion. The sector where social change often comes from. And this makes our role as initiators of social change even more important, because disempowered groups need your support to stand up to and overcome these added challenges. And I'll tell you a couple of stories in a little while which will demonstrate that. But why are you here today? Well, the answers are, as we saw in that last video, to provide support for each other as you address unfairness and injustice and disadvantage by governments and by private enterprise, and to act to remedy those injustices so that those of us disadvantaged in the community have more control of our own lives. You're all about finding social changes which will get people off the bench and back into Team Australia. Now, there are many reasons why people should be supported to be back in Team Australia, to take control of our own lives. But basically, they came down to the reality that societies work better if all members are included, and that societies are less functional if there are people excluded from them or on the margins of them. Now, these precepts have been recognised by most societies throughout history, that it's not beneficial for 45% of one group of society, and I'm talking here about people with disabilities, to live below the poverty line. That it's not beneficial for one group in society, again, people with disabilities, to be employed at a participation rate 30% less than the general population. or that it's not beneficial when the Year 12 completion rate in the general population is 50% for people with disabilities to only have a completion rate of 25%. But despite knowing that marginalisation is not good for society, that's what we do to many groups of people. People who are homeless, young people, Aboriginal people, and people with disabilities, just to name a few. We do have laws and conventions and taxes and other measures which seek to redress that social imbalance. But much of that imbalance won't be reversed without the involvement of people such as you and me. So don't tell me that you're only one person and that you can't make a difference, because in reality, you're the only one who can. So how can you achieve social change? Well, let me tell you a story about me. I just wanted to catch the train. That's all I wanted to do. This was hard because Sydney Trains didn't announce each station as the train arrived at it. If you could see, their signs told you where you were. But for me, that was about as helpful as having the Attorney General explain metadata. I just wanted them to tell me where I was in the same way that they did for other passengers. Now, according to the standards under the Disability Discrimination Act, Sydney Trains were supposed to do it by 2007, but they weren't doing it. I talked to them about it. I attempted to resolve it with them by conciliation. I met with the Minister and explained to them what was needed and how they could change their current systems. But when none of those methods worked, I took them to the Federal Magistrates Court, because every time a train didn't tell me where I was, I lodged a complaint. I think by the time I got to court, I was up to 78 complaints. And in the Federal Magistrates Court, they spent $500,000, $500,000, which could have been spent on better public address systems or on training guards to make announcements. They spent that defending their position. Now, pleasingly, I won that case, and announcements are made now much more frequently on Sydney Trains, providing a better travel experience for me, but not only for me, for all commuters, whether you can see the signs or not. Because if you're looking down at your mobile phone or reading your book or whatever else you might do on a train, you get told where you are. Now, why have I told you this story? Because I want to encourage a broader sort of thinking, ensuring that society caters for everyone, not just for people without disabilities, or not just for people without a particular disadvantage, because that's how we address hairy social problems. And that's what advocacy and social change is all about. But it's a responsibility that we all share, not just some of us. The then leader of Australia's military, David Morrison, who's just retired, recently said, and he said this in the context of inappropriate behaviour towards women in the Defence Force, that the standards we walk past are the standards we accept. And this raised the bar on that topic, making inappropriate behaviour a responsibility for the whole ADF. And I want you to use your skills to raise the bar for people who are disadvantaged. I want you to make social change. And my key question for you from this presentation is, what can I do differently today which will begin or continue and contribute to that social change? I, as one, don't have the answer to that question. But together, we do. And that, of course, is the power of many. Because inappropriate treatment of people who are disadvantaged or people with disabilities is the responsibility for all of us, because the standards we walk past are the standards we accept. We all need to think about the ways we can change our society to include everyone. And we do that by changing our individual behaviour in everything we do. Not just making our buildings and our buses accessible, not just better resourcing people with mental illness in our community, not just finding accommodation for people who are homeless, not just finding jobs for people who are unemployed. It's about changing our whole approach. So what should we do, you might ask? Well, we shouldn't disempower people by removing or reducing benefits. We shouldn't not accept that there's nothing that we can do if a person can't vote because they're living on the street. We need to address that. We shouldn't not expect that everyone will behave in the same way. Because you can hear a question asked in a noisy restaurant, don't get cranky with the customer who asks you to look at them when you're speaking to them, because they may have a hearing impairment. Give some thought to why your employee is asking to work less hours for a month or two, or to change their hours or go home a bit earlier. Because with a few careful questions, you may discover that it's as a result of their mental illness. We won't have a fair and well-functioning community until we include all of its different members. Team Australia is for all of us, and that's what your skills can achieve. And we won't include everyone until we challenge the negative assumptions that are made about people, until we take that biscuit and realise which packet it came from. Now, one of the ways we might do that, or at least start to do that, is by, as I said earlier, turning some assumptions upside down. And I want to demonstrate that. Now, I want all of you who came here today and didn't bring your own chairs to stand up. Come on, up you get. Anyone who didn't bring their own chair. Now, you all cost CoAct extra because we had to bring you in a chair. All right, sit back down now. Enjoy that comfortable chair. Now, are you nice and relaxed? Good. Can you recognise the benefit that that chair has provided? All right. Now let's go a little further. Can we dim the lights? In fact, can we turn the lights off? I mean, are you ready to take part in this conference in the dark? Well, come on, I am. What's your problem? All right, let's not touch the lights. But recognise all of that light which we're providing for you. And finally, did everyone get that sentence? What did I say? Oh, you can't lip read. Okay. Well, let's also recognise the cost of the public address system which we're using for this conference. You see, the problem with our society is that all of you able-bodied people are costing us so much extra. Yeah, it's because of those chairs and lights and loudspeakers. Now, look, if we could cut out those costs, Joe Hockey's economy would be zinging along. You know, we'd be whisked into surplus. On the other hand, perhaps I should show a little bit of humanity and respect for your difference. And I think that what I'll do is I'll start a campaign for a national able-bodied insurance scheme. But seriously, while ever those negative assumptions are made, we all need to challenge them. Let me tell you my employment story. I completed College of Law and started the process of finding a job. And over a 12-month period, I applied for 30 jobs in legal positions with government agencies and the private sector. I didn't get any of them. Employers couldn't understand how a blind person could function as a lawyer. And no matter how much I explained the methods that I would use, they were just not convinced. I struck the wall of discrimination, which many people with disabilities face, and for 12 months, I couldn't get past it. And I finally despaired, and having completed 5 years of law degree and College of Law, I took a job in the New South Wales Public Service as a clerical assistant. I used to joke that I was the only clerical assistant in the public service with a law degree. And one of my duties was to answer the phone and tell people the winning lotto numbers. And you need a law degree to do that. I was made redundant from that role by an answering machine. And I moved on as a clerk to the Department of Consumer Affairs, where the senior legal officer, Dave, wasn't totally convinced that I could work as a lawyer, but he, unlike all of the others, was prepared to give it a try. Dave's change of attitude changed my life. And you too can change lives by changing someone's attitude. You should use this conference to hone your skills, because through the power of many, we can find solutions to those challenges. And when you return to your desks on Thursday, set yourself the goal to make at least one contribution towards social change every day. One small contribution. You'll be amazed at the difference that you make. Thanks for the chance to speak with you this morning.